also noticed like with a lot of different people who do it, once you sit down and then a whole bunch of people just kind of like
Once they see something,
something's going on. So you're going to talk about it in the panel, I'm sure. What is your role from the industry? How do you guys just for the clients?
Hello to this exciting, very early morning session. I know second week of COP, it's hard to get up early. But maybe what we'll do is slowly get started, and then hopefully people will trigger in, and we also have some people online. Cool, but welcome. Today we'll discuss a little bit about just transition, specifically co-creation and stakeholder engagement for a just transition. And I have some great speakers with me today that I'll bring up on a panel a little bit later, including Diana Junquera, who is the Director of Energy Industry and Just Transition for Industrial, and also co-director of ITUC's Just Transition Center. Then we have Cristina Morral, Senior Analyst of Climate Policies and International Alliances at Iberdrola. And we have Ana Costa, VP of Sustainability, Legal and Corporate Reputation at Natura & Co. This event is hosted by We Mean Business, the B Team and BSR. And I'm Anine Bundgard from BSR. I'm a manager on actually both of our climate and human rights team, because I really work in this intersection of people and climate. So how are people being impacted by climate changes, but also climate transitions, and how can companies help navigate that? So a little bit about BSR, if you don't know it. We are a sustainability advisory and member network, and we have around 300 members, mostly large international companies with global value chains that we then support across sustainability issues. So everything ranging from human rights, equity, inclusion, justice, climate change, and with specific industry experts to sort of support this insights and advisory. We also facilitate collaborative initiatives across different companies to develop sustainable solutions, and sometimes also with civil society organizations. We're based all over the world, so very global organization with offices in the Americas, in Europe, and in Asia. And we've been around for 30 years, so I think for sustainability that's a pretty long time, and now it's become one of those things where we have such deep expertise on specific sustainability topics, but then also those interconnected spaces where just transition, of course, is one of those key spaces of understanding both social and climate impacts and how it all connects. On the agenda today, I'll then just briefly sort of set the stage a bit on just transition, stakeholder engagement, co-creation, and then we'll bring up our panel for the majority of the time. But we'll also have some time towards the end for questions and a little bit of engagement to also understand how are you approaching stakeholder engagement, co-creation, navigating just transition, and hopefully having a little bit of a discussion. So setting the scene for just transition. At BSR, we like to use the ILO definition. So really talking about greening the economy in a way that is as fair and as inclusive as possible to everyone concerned, creating decent work opportunity and leaving no one behind. So a just transition really involves maximizing the positive opportunities, impacts, and carefully minimizing and managing the negative impacts, and really doing this very closely with impacted stakeholders. We see this as both a process and an outcome, because of course this outcome is a green and good future for all, but the process is equally inclusive in getting us there, and so it's really important. And for that reason, stakeholder engagement, social dialogue, co-creation is such an important part of Just Transition. It's really a cornerstone to everything we do in this process. Even as companies start to develop Just Transition plans, it's really key that this engagement is part of the decision making, and that it's proactive, responsive, inclusive, and ongoing to be meaningful, because that's the only way we'll enable a future that is just and inclusive. Of course, then it gets a little bit tricky identifying workers and communities and who is it that you need to engage. But essentially, you need to engage everyone who's impacted and can have a positive role in this future. And so we're looking both at labor, so workforce and unions, at contractors, at workforce development partners. We want to include communities that are impacted, including indigenous people, local civil society, vulnerable groups. Of course, businesses can have a really important role here, also looking at customers, business partners, suppliers, and investors. And lastly, of course, governments have a really key input in terms of the development aspect, in terms of social protection, and really ensuring that people development plans play in with sort of corporate transitions, and that everything can develop into synergies between the action that's carried out. Now, that brings us a little bit into the co-creation space as well, because the gold standard approach to community engagement sees communities not only consulted, but invited to co-design benefit sharing arrangements. And I think this is a really good quote by the Columbia Center on Sustainability. Thank you. Because we want to move away from traditional stakeholder engagement as consultation and towards processes where impacted stakeholders are heard and meaningfully engaged in decision making and design of the solutions. Often we see that the people who are impacted have the best understanding, knowledge of where are their skill gaps, how are people being impacted, what's the future they want. And so this co-creation really becomes a cornerstone in Just Transition work, as opposed to sort of consultation that has more traditionally been done. But co-creation is challenging, right? It's often looking at a little bit longer timelines, because there's such a big process of building trust and relationships to do something together. We see a lot of benefits to co-creation, because that's where we can become a little bit more creative, and we understand the holistic perspectives that people bring to the table. We understand complex realities, and we get to design those solutions in a way that embrace all of that. But of course, it's something where we, and maybe especially sort of, there can be some conflicting timelines in terms of how long is this expected to take? Can we fit this in with corporate agendas and sort of shorter timelines that we usually operate under? How can we navigate the whole power balance system and really meaningfully communicate, engage together in spite of maybe cultural differences as well? So it's definitely something where we see companies are still learning, but it's also something where there's a lot of progress, and we're hoping to see even more of this in the future. And so maybe this brings me to our panel today, because they will share with us a bit of their experiences on stakeholder engagement and co-creation for a just transition, and really put some flesh to what this means in practice and some of the challenges and experiences they've had. So maybe let me welcome to the stage, and I'll just briefly introduce you again. So we have Ana Costa, VP of Sustainability, Legal and Corporate Reputation at Natura & Co. And then we have Cristina Morral, who is the Senior Analyst of Climate Policies and International Alliances at Iberdrola. And lastly, we have Diana Junquera from Industrial and ITUC's Just Transition Center as the Energy and Industry Just Transition Director and Co-Director of the center. Cool. So I'll stop with the boring slides and instead ask you a couple of questions. And maybe, Christina, I'll start with you, because I'd love to hear a little bit more about why you think this stakeholder engagement is important, and how you've engaged both internally with the workforce and externally with other affected stakeholders on just transition. I think it should be on.
Works? Yeah? Okay. So, well, thank you, Anine. Thank you. First of all, thank you to BSR for organizing this panel and for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be here. So, for us at Iberdrola, the just transition is a key principle, because we and why it is a key principle, because you know that to achieve the net zero goals and to achieve the climate action goals and the Paris Agreement, we need to undertake this transition, and we cannot do it alone. We can only do it by engaging with all the stakeholders that are around us, internally, externally. We have to build alliances. We have to work together and work hand in hand, and we see it as the only way to achieve a just and a successful transition. So this is why it is so important for us to engage with all the stakeholders and with all partners, and to work together. So what do we do internally and externally? Well, internally, we have, of course, an open dialogue among all the different departments at Iberdrola. I work, as you mentioned, at the Climate Change and Alliances department, and this is important for internal, but also for the external focus. And we have, since many years, we have set up an internal, it's called the Climate Change Working Group, but it's an internal group with almost all departments concerned precisely in achieving this objective of achieving a successful energy transition for all. So we have representatives from the Investors Relations Department. We have colleagues from ESG, colleagues from the Renewables Department, from Communication, from the Legal Department, from Climate Action and Innovation departments, and we exchange and coordinate internally what are the actions that the company undertakes and what are the challenges, and we also share information so everyone internally is aware. So I think this group works very well. We meet once a month approximately, and we have there all representatives, and not only from the different departments, but also from the different geographies in which Iberdrola is present, because, you know, we have I haven't started by this, but I don't know if you know, well, Iberdrola is a global renewable energy company, and we have presence in many countries, including Brazil, United States, United Kingdom, Spain, and Mexico and Australia and other countries. So we also make sure that all these geographies are represented in this internal group. So this is for internal. And for external, as I mentioned, I mean, but I think we will deep in that later on, but we work with suppliers, we work with, of course, with the authorities. It's been a while since we closed all our coal plants at Iberdrola, but and Diana, I'm sure she will talk about this, but we had a very good experience under the tripartite agreements in Spain with the governments, with workers, and with unions. And we work, of course, with all our partners, and we build alliances that I mentioned. And well, with BSR, for example, you're here. We collaborated very closely in the Energy for a Just Transition collaboration set up by you and the B team. So, well, we work also at the local level, and I'm sure I will have the occasion to talk about this later on. So with local communities involved in the transition and, yeah, with all stakeholders involved.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for highlighting how, extensive stakeholder engagement you have going on as well, and how many actors are really relevant to engage in this. I know we see a lot of our member companies actually have a lot of the expertise to engage on just transition in different departments such as human rights or climate or procurement, in their work with suppliers. But really linking it all together is one of those places where just transition starts to make a lot of sense. So thanks for sharing that. And maybe later I'd love to hear more about, the learnings of doing that in practice and what's challenging. But maybe I'll turn to you, Diana, then to talk a little bit about social dialogue and why it's so crucial to engage workers, maybe both bipartite and tripartite, and yeah, this whole process, like what is challenging, what is necessary, and what are the most important topics.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. And yeah, I will start introducing my organization first. So we are Global Union. I have two different hats. One is with Industry All Global Union, that we are a global union that represents workers in mining, energy, and manufacturing sectors. And and the other hat is with ITUC, that is the Union Confederation, representing workers in all the sectors. And yeah, we represent like 200 million workers all around the world. So what one of the basics for us on this just transition is the concept of including workers in the dialogue, because that is what makes it just. If we don't have the workers in the discussion, it's just a transition, but it's not a just transition. So that's why for us it's so important. We understand, as Christina was saying, that we have to be together at the table in the same discussions, because the companies alone, they can do the transition that they want, of course, but it's never going to be just, because the companies are made from people that is working in those companies. So you need to involve them, because you are talking about their futures, about their lives, and they need to be part of those decisions. They need to feel that they are creating something or co-creating something with their own employers, and that they are able to build up on that. So it's, for us, there is no other way of a transition that it doesn't include the dialogue and doesn't include workers.
Thank you so much. And maybe a quick follow-up. Could you talk a little bit to some of the topics that you see companies engaging in social dialogue on, or across different sectors or industries? How do you best figure out sort of the key topics to engage on and then start this social dialogue?
Yeah, one of the key examples that I'm sure that maybe Christina can talk more about it, because they are one of the parts involved on this, is in Spain the closure of the coal thermal power plant, and how this has been made in Spain, bringing together the government, the companies that were closing the power plants, and the unions. So that was a perfect example of tripartite dialogue and collaboration There are things that could be done better, of course, but could be also much worse. So we are not going to criticize this. It's a good example that if you plan it in advance, it can give a good results. But other sectors where we work, for example, is in the textile and garment sector. That now we can see how the companies are turning into all these second-hand circularity, circular economy, and all these new trends that are appearing, and that workers are trying to adapt themselves, but also at the same time trying to find the way of including the new technologies, the new materials, the new fabrics that they have to work with. So there is all a new trend in the sectors that used to be like that before, and that now we are facing how this is happening. And also something that we were discussing just before the panel, it was about how we can cover as well the supply chain, because we don't talk only about the main companies that are the big names that we all know, but it's also the companies that are all along the supply chain. So that could be one example just to start, and maybe we can continue later.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then maybe Anna, I'll turn to you to share a little bit about how Natura & Co. has engaged with your suppliers in Brazil and Amazonian communities on just transition and sort of the climate changes and transitions you're seeing and how you can support those communities.
Okay, thank you for the question. Natura is a Brazilian multinational company and since that works with the local communities for more than 25 years. So the center of our business are these communities. We are totally dependent on them. So the resilience of their own business is totally proportional to the resilience of our own business. So just one example, we have more than 44 ingredients used in our products that come from Amazon. So we don't have only a transactional relationship. We have much more than this. The communities are our partners. We have almost 50 communities around in Latin America, so not only in Brazil, but also in Colombia and Peru. And it's not only a trade relationship, as I mentioned. We invest on the communities. We provide education, financial education, citizenship, and we try to make like this relationship a sourcing of goods, a sourcing of good results, not only for our business, but for their health and for their well-being. So whenever we are facing in Latin America a lot of climate crisis, it impacts our business as well. Our supply chain structure are totally dependent on them. So what we are trying to do is we have some disaster protocol we enforce every time that we have a climate crisis. That is how we can support the communities and the 10,000 families who live around our business, our manufacturing plant in Pará. So, for example, some invoices that we have, we postpone the invoice, so we pay earlier in order to give some financial brief to the communities. We also provide a financial support, like an allowance to them, to make them to be able to be financial health during this period. Even with the beauty consultants that we work with, we have the same protocols, postponing invoices. So a lot of providing telemedicine, providing psychological support to them. So there are a lot of initiatives trying to bring this resilience and this adaptation to their business, and likewise to our business as well. So this is one perspective of this. The second one is how we can create a more resilient business, other sourcing of incomes to them. So environmental services, so even agroforestry systems that we are totally working in partnership with them. So we try to invite them to be part of our business, not only to pay for the goods, to be just an overtaking of the products. And this is what we can do to be in the future. And especially one thing that we develop is to listen to the communities. So when you listen to them, we understand exactly what they need. So sometimes you think that they need education. No, but I don't have sometimes food on my table. So I need to have some telecommunication or wireless to be able to be connected with the world. So we listen to them and we work with private and public partnerships in order to provide to them what we need, because we cannot do anything alone. So we depend on these partnerships with the public sector and even other companies in the private sector. So we invite other companies as well to go to our manufacturing plant to be able to do this like a condominium, a well-being condominium, to provide these conditions to the community. So we decided to launch, I think 1 year ago, one blended finance tool that is exactly, first of all, we heard what they need, and then we have this blended finance exactly to provide them money, because otherwise the money can come to Natura, but it's impossible to arrive in the field in the end of the chain. So we hear to them and we go to the banks, we have this blended finance instrument, and then we teach them how to use this money in order to be more resilient and in order to have more adjust climate transition and in order to provide income. In the end of the day, there are people, they need money, and we are there to make this partnership and to make it happen.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really like how you've actively listened and developed solutions together with these communities and really understood the impacts they're facing and not just what you can see sort of from a distance. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that process of co-creation, and maybe I know that that's sometimes a struggle, like a difficult process that also comes with challenges, maybe both in communication, timelines, trust. Could you talk a little bit to sort of any challenges or learnings, insights you have from this process?
I think that the first one is to be humble enough, exactly, to listen and not to start doing things, and to have a trust. Trust for me is the name of the game. You need to have a trustful relationship with these communities. It's not easy. Sometimes you say, oh, you are in the Amazon. No, there are a lot of Amazons in the middle of Brazil, and sometimes it's difficult to be there and to really be there, not only to, as I mentioned, to have this transactional relationship. So we have an area in Natura that lives in Amazon. So they are there exactly to do this, to have this trust relationship with them. So trust is, for me, is what's going to change this game. And the second one is collaboration. So a collaboration, a two hands collaboration with the communities. It's not an easy process. You need time, and sometimes you don't have time. Considering all the urgent climate issues that we are facing, we need to speed up this action. So we need to bring more companies in this condominium that I mentioned to be there, to understand and to create this trust relationship. So for me, this is what makes the difference, is to be there, is to have this relation and to co-create, as you mentioned, not to assume that we know exactly what they need, but to hear and then to make actions. Because what I used to say is that companies with purpose are wonderful, but you need to put this purpose in actions. Otherwise, it will be a loss of time and it will not generate any positive impact. And we don't need to waste time. Time is something that we do not have. So trust, be there, and trust on the communities, have more than a sale and purchase agreement, and investing on listen what they need exactly.
Thank you so much. And maybe what I can learn from that as well for companies that are less advanced or starting this process is that maybe it starts with this relationship and really building a good relationship with your suppliers, partners, workers, communities, to slowly build this trust where you can get to a space of true co-creation for, both business resiliency, community resiliency, worker resiliency in this process.
And especially to understand that everything is connected and interdependent. So when you talk about a nature-based solution as Natura is, and when you talk about climate and when you talk about people. So it's the new triple bottom line, in my opinion, that we need to be interconnected together. And it's possible to have regenerative business. So business is aligned. So what we use it to say is to take these challenges, to take this socio-environmental, that is always together, social and environmental challenges, into business opportunities. So it's possible to be done, and this is exactly what we are trying to do.
Thank you so much. And maybe Christina, I'll turn to you then to hear a little bit, because I know you've engaged through Iberdrola as well in a lot of stakeholder engagement, social dialogue. Do you have any sort of best practice examples or key learnings from these processes that you think others can learn from? I think it's on and you're just...
Yeah, it's working? No? Yeah? Okay. Yes, well, I do have lots of examples, so we can. I mean, I can talk about several of them.
Is it working?
First, maybe.
Is it working?
No. Sorry. No.
Yeah.
No, sorry. Now it's better. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have several examples at Iberdrola, and of course all of them are based on building trust, as we were saying, and on collaboration and on dialogue. So maybe I can mention some of them, and if you want, I can deepen more in one or two. But for example, you know, since at Iberdrola we closed our coal power plants a long time ago, and we are completely focused on the deployment of renewable energies. We will be a net zero in all scopes before 2040. So this is our objective. So for us, of course, the transitioning out already happened, and now we are completely focused on this transition into this economic model based on renewable energies and on energy efficient solutions. And for that, for example, in the communities where we used to have some of the coal power plants in Spain, for example, in the north, we had 2 coal plants, and now we are investing in reindustrializing this region, so that the local communities, the workers that are there, can seize the opportunities of the transition. So, for example, last year, last year we signed an agreement with Exiom, which is a photovoltaic manufacturing company, who used to produce in China. And now, and it's operational since some months ago, we built the first photovoltaic manufacturing plant in the north of Spain, and it's one of the first ones in an industrial scale also in Europe to produce these photovoltaic panels in Spain. So it helps us to reindustrialize this region. It has created more than 100 jobs in the region. It's in the north of Spain, in Asturias, for those of you who know. Well, it also strengthened the energy security on the one hand, and it helps a lot in this transition in the region. So this is one of the examples. Another example can be, since of course the just transition, I think for all of us, has to be inclusive. So for example, in Brazil, we have a school for electricians, for women specifically, because traditionally energy and electricity has been a sector more for men, or considered more for men, where more men used to work, but of course it's not. No. So, and also the security component, because some of these women did not feel secure in going to work. So we put in place this school for electricians, and we have lots of women working now in the electricity sector in Brazil, because they feel more comfortable being in a group. And well, this is another examples, and well, I have many more, but I
no, but thanks. And maybe a follow up to that. So you talked a little bit about this transitioning out versus transitioning in, and I know maybe for the transitioning out, the whole stakeholder engagement and who to engage and how. is a little bit more intuitive, but for transitioning in, could you talk us through a little bit of the process of how are you identifying even sort of the key topics or the key stakeholders to engage? What has been your process of that stakeholder engagement or even co-creation with the relevant stakeholders there?
Well, we need to continue, collaborating with all actors. But for example, with suppliers, suppliers, I think is a quite good example because if we want to achieve to be net zero, we have to be net zero in all scopes, and of course, scope 3 involves suppliers. So we have also a specific program to work with our suppliers to support them in their respective transition towards a decarbonized system. Lots of them are SMEs, small and medium enterprises. So we put also a lot of emphasis in supporting those small companies. For example, in Mexico, we have a tool to support them in measuring their carbon footprint. But also in Spain, and I don't know the figures because I don't manage this program myself, but I have the figures here. So just let me check because I don't want to make a mistake. So our local supplier strategy, for example, in 2022, and I don't have the 2023 figure, sorry, because my website is not working from here, so I could not update the figure. But in 2022, 87% of the purchases were from local suppliers in Spain, and as I mentioned, we have the objective that at least 85% of the main suppliers of Iberdrola have to be subject to sustainable policies and standards in the period 2023-2025, so by next year. And I know we are doing very well, and we will exceed this figure, and of course we will continue.
Yeah, no, thank you.
This
That's
is an example.
very helpful. Yeah. No, and it
I
makes
have all the
sense.
figures, but I think it's too much.
No, it's good. And supplier engagement, of course, is just a key thing, because as we also with new regulations that we're seeing, and in Europe so much increasing reporting requirements, we are also pushing additional requirements on suppliers, right? So this engagement to understand, well, what are the needs, where's the capacity building needs, what needs to happen to get us all to this just future is a really key aspect. And Diana, maybe can you share a little bit of successful stories of like co-creation related to just transition that you've seen?
Yes. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, something in the way that we work, let's say in the unions, we have agreements. I mean, we negotiate agreements, right? Or collective bargaining at national level, but also at European or at global level. So in those cases, we have some good practices of collaboration that have developed partnerships in terms of just transition. One example could be, for example, with Eni, the Italian oil and gas company, energy company, where they develop with the unions at national level an agreement on just transition, how the company is going to transform all their production or part of the production into renewables, and how they are doing it together with the unions and how they are involving them. So that could be one of the examples. Also, for example, I was mentioning other sectors, like not only energy, but in the automotive sector. With all the changes in the coming with the electrical vehicles, and all what this is bringing, we work together, for example, with alliances like the Global Battery Alliance, that is helping us because we represent workers in the entire supply chain, as I was mentioning, from the batteries from the mining, the extraction of the minerals that are needed, to the chemical part, to use those materials, but also to ensemble them, and also in the final use as energy or in the vehicles for as energy storage or electricity storage, but also in the vehicles. So, for example, we work with different groups like the Global Battery Alliance in terms of helping us to develop all these strategies and support the workers along the entire supply chain.
Thank you. And do you have any recommendations? I know, across the world, and now you were talking about mining, which maybe is happening in very diverse places. Some places it's very common to have worker unions and these official representatives to engage with. Do you have any recommendations for companies in geographies where that's more difficult? Like how can you then enable this worker representation?
Yeah. Let me see how I can say this
It's a tough one.
in a diplomatic way. Unions are everywhere. In some places are bigger or stronger than in others, but they are almost everywhere, unless there are in some countries where the legislation don't allow them to exist. So in the countries where they exist, it's very easy. They are there. You only have to talk to them and allow them to work and to get the compromise, the commitment to engage and to work together with the companies. So they are there. You only need what Anna was mentioning. You only have to listen to the people. What do they need? What are they looking for? And because in this transition, and it's something that I do personally believe, but it's something that we are listening all these days about the trust. And how we can make this together. What you need is to work in this transition in a way that everyone can trust the process and that is a win-win for everyone. We are here, no one wants to lose. No one want to miss anything. So if you have to win, you need to co-create and to have partners at the same level in the negotiations, in the table, let's say.
Yeah, thank you. And how do you do that? How do you get people at the same level?
Well, it's kind of easy inviting them to be with you. So it's what I was saying at the beginning. If you consider that you as a company, you are making the transition by yourself and you don't talk to anyone, you just talk to your... Exactly, you are in a bubble and you don't talk to anyone else, that will never go deeper to the real issues. But for that, you need to talk to all the stakeholders. You need to bring the workers into the discussion, but also the governments, the national governments, the regional ones, because they are the policy makers. They also have a big role to play in all this transition. It's not only the companies that, for sure, they are the ones that many times they have the investments and they took the strategic decisions, but also the governments have a role to play. But also the communities, because where you are acting is not only about the workers, that it's what we represent. We also live in communities. And for example, what we always say that for each worker that is that has to transition, that is displaced, you have 4 people behind. That could be family, could be business around, whatever. But yesterday I was in another panel and a colleague was saying that in the United States, in the automobile industry, for each worker in the auto sector, you have 70 workers along the supply chain. So it's not only the worker that you are moving or displacing, is all what it's around and behind. So you really need to bring everyone to the table and to to see the entire picture in an holistic way that can allow you to have that broader overview.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and maybe that's where the stakeholder engagement becomes so important, because there's no way of predicting that trickle-down effect. Maybe a company can predict, worker impacts and very direct communities, but because it has such broad implications, right?
Yeah, and if I may add something else, it's also sometimes we face the denial of the transition, because people sometimes they don't think that this is going to happen. And sometimes it's that they don't want it to happen, what is totally normal, because you are scared of what is going to be in the future, where are you going to work, where your family is going to be. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So because of that, it's so important to have all those discussions and include everyone, because with that at least we can see a future, a clearer future. Because if not, I think about myself. I wouldn't like to be now in a place that I don't know what is going to happen tomorrow with me. They are telling me, yeah, you have to move, you have to go somewhere else, but where?
Yeah.
And to do what?
Yeah.
And what are going to be my working conditions and my family? How I'm going to feed my family? So it's totally normal, and I don't think that no one here in this room would like to have that uncertainty. So for that, I think that the dialogue and the trust is key.
Yeah, understanding what the transition means for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's as easy as it is. Yeah.
Thank you. And maybe Anna, I'll follow up on that point with you, because you talked previously a little bit about this just transition engagement related to climate resiliency. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on maybe the mitigation aspect as well, or as Natura & Co is decarbonizing and putting in place climate strategies, what does that engagement look like with workers or communities or other stakeholders?
Yes, we have, I think that every company today have, but we have a commitment. We just launched here the commitment for 2050, and obviously that we have some targets in terms of carbon. We are carbon neutral since 2007. So what we are trying to do is to be net zero in scope 1 and 2. This is our commitment by 2030, and to reduce 42% of carbon emissions in scope 3. But as you said, talking about scope up to 2030. But as you mentioned, we cannot do this alone. We need our supply chain to be together with us. So we just launched last year one alliance, like a coalition with all our suppliers, the biggest ones and the small ones, trying to bring them. This is an invitation. And as you mentioned, you need to be resilient in climate and even to be resilient in the invitations. Because sometimes, okay, no, I will not be able to do this. No, you can. So to make them understand that regardless the size of the company, they can do something, and that we are there to multiply some concepts to scale up. This is the issue. How can we scale up in a faster way? And we need to engage the suppliers, not only the ones who are in Amazon that we do this directly, but the other ones that we need to make this partnership as well in a collaborative way. That is the other name of the game, in order to bring them to the stage as well. So we have this plan, we have commitment. Carbon neutral is not enough anymore. We need to talk to make this transition, as the transition needs to be for everybody everywhere. So we need to make this transition internally as well, to not talk about carbon neutral, but to talk about net zero for the future, that it will make the difference. So we are doing this. And what we are trying to do in this connection between nature, climate, and people that needs to have its income, that is, as you mentioned, is okay, what it means to me. Communication is key in this process as well. And we need to adapt your speech and your language to all the audience that you deal with. So when we go to talk with the communities, and that is one good example that for me is wonderful. And we spent a lot of time investing in R&D and research, how we can find and figure out other alternatives other than deforestation in the forest, and how deforestation is connected with this net zero strategy, and how we can do this together. Together with the communities, the riverside communities, we realized after 10 years of research that there was one bioingredient, ukuuba. I don't know if you ever heard about this, but it's one ingredient that we use in our moisturizing creams that after 10 years of research, and in the past it was used, this ukuuba was used just to make broom randle, that is a very low value added activity. So they produce this, they sell ukuuba just to have broom stick or broom randle to sell in the forest. After 10 years, we realized that this ukuuba has a moisturizing, has a hyaluronic acid, has a lot of other properties that can be used in our products. So like tucumã, ukuuba. So this is what we are trying to do, connected with their traditional knowledge, connected with them. That's how we can see exactly the properties of these bioingredients to use this in our products and to generate income to these communities that they would prefer to sell to us than to work in the deforestation. So it's what we are trying to do, connected with them, but using our knowledge as well, our R&D expertise, in order to develop this expertise as well. So we need to have examples in all areas and connected with communities, big suppliers, and also government. I think that public policy, we need to have this. We need to talk with we are not talking about, oh, what are we going to do with this mandate? No, we are talking about public policies. So it's what we need to defend in order to make this just transition as well.
Yeah, thank you. And one more example of like, okay, how important is it then to engage and understand more diverse solutions and maybe building on traditional knowledge? And
Innovation.
Yeah.
How can we use sustainability, innovation, and using diversity as well?
Yeah, exactly. And I think in climate solutions and nature-based solutions, there's a lot to be gained also from indigenous knowledge, right? And how some of these solutions are actually quite ideal for the transition that needs to happen, both climate-wise, but also socially. Thank you so much. And then maybe Christina, I'll turn to you because if any of you are engaging in just transition and stakeholder engagement, co-creation, we know it's a challenging process, right? And love to sort of learn from others that have good insights into this process. So just wondering if you can give any recommendations for companies maybe early in this process or who are starting to do more stakeholder engagement or co-creation on just transition. Any tips on how to do that, how to start the process internally or externally?
Yes.
Yes.
So, sure. Well, apart from all the things that we have mentioned, social dialogue is crucial, collaboration, build trust among all the stakeholders. So I think maybe more concretely, it is trainings are very good examples internally and also externally. For example, with our suppliers, we also conduct trainings to support them in decarbonizing, etc. But also internally, I mean, in the strategic plan from 2024 to 2026, Iberdrola has foreseen 68,000 hours of training for its employees, because this is essential to raise awareness, but also to know. Diana was saying, but how? No, or so this is essential also to answer to this question. Then I would say it's very important also to establish interim goals. So we know that the goal is to become net zero by well, in our case, before 2040, but by 2050, no, for several countries and other companies. So I think it's essential also to establish a clear pathway on how to arrive to this goal, and establishing interim goals, I think, might help. And also to take into account the, because as I understand it, but I think lots of us, I mean, the just transition is multi-dimensional and involves lots of actors. So we have to take into account all these dimensions and all these actors. At the local level, we also have to take into account the most vulnerable ones. So when we were talking about the suppliers, the SMEs, we have to pay attention to the SMEs because they do not have the tools that we big companies have. So we have to support them. We also, at Iberdrola, we put an important focus on youth because they will be the workers of tomorrow in our company. So I think we have also to take into account maybe not the usual suspects that we always take into account, that of course need to be taken into account as well, but also other groups and paying special attention to the vulnerable ones, and collaboration. I think I really think that the only way to achieve this is by being together, working together, exchanging, and I think also initiatives to exchange best practices or to brainstorm and reflect on how this transition should be and how we have to undertake, how we have to engage with stakeholders. So the example of the work we have done with the BSR and the B team, we had a 3-year collaboration that just ended some weeks ago, and we drafted a guide on how to engage precisely as stakeholders and the importance of co-creation. So this work is also important with other companies and BSR and the B team, and other examples of collaborations like this to provide guidelines and materials, because on just transition, we talk a lot on just transition, but it's true that we do not have that many literature, I would say. So it's also important to have these guidelines and these materials to support us and others. These are some recommendations, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much. And maybe I'll open up a little bit to the audience if you have some questions for this panel, or if there's anything that you felt resonated with you or that you've seen in your own organizations. We'd love to hear. Yeah?
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for your presentation. I want to hear more about the suppliers and buyers, right? So whether you directly or the businesses you work with your customers, asking you for the carbon footprint of the products and services you provide to them. For example, product carbon footprint. And do you feel that's increasing the pressure from your buyers? Do they ask you to provide carbon data of your products? And the second part of this question, whether you push your suppliers to provide carbon footprint data of the products they supply to you, like the feedstocks you buy, for example, to manufacture products. And I know it's quite hard to engage suppliers. It's hard to get the data from them. And it seems like companies operating in a kind of fog of war environment. There's nobody discloses their carbon footprint because it's competitive. They're hiding data. They don't want why you need that. They have no clue about climate, and just want to hear how you influence them. What are the problems you face, and what would be your strategy to improve carbon disclosure across the supply chain? Thank you. Did you hear me well? Yeah. Right.
Start. I think this is a good example of what we are trying to do in this alliance of suppliers. We have all kind of suppliers, so we have small companies and we have big companies. Obviously, that when you're talking with big companies, they are much more well structured with information, but it's a cultural issue. For me, culture is another important point that it needs to be embedded in the culture of the companies. But when you are, for example, for Natura, when you are a supplier for Natura, this is something that even when in the RFP and when we start talking with a supplier, they know exactly what they need to comply. Slavery is not allowed, diverse and carbon footprint is another issue that is entered in this screen. That, okay, what do you need, the due diligence that we do with the supplier. So this is something that we need to do internally. Sometimes you need to, it's cost, so we need to think about this as well. but again, the resilience of our business is totally dependent as well in the supplier. And if you want to make the difference and even to achieve the targets of scope 3, that is totally dependent on them, we need to be resilient in the invitation, as I mentioned it before, and to explain to them what is important. As I mentioned, communication is key to all stakeholders. And okay, if you want to supply things to Natura, you need to address these goals and these minimum targets in order to be in. And if you do not do this, let's go together. Like, give me your hand and I'm gonna teach you, and we're gonna go together to do this. But it's a journey. We are obviously that we have a lot of things to do and to learn, and even to learn with them as well. They have a lot of questions. They don't know even how to start when you're talking about small companies. But when you mention that it's an inclusive process, you need to invite everybody. So what I can say is that for big companies, I think that it's something that they should do. It's not something an option anymore when you talk about big companies and big suppliers. When you talk about middle and small companies, this is the big challenge that we have. But we created this alliance in order exactly to educate, to co-partner with them about how we can do the difference and how the importance to have the data, to have the clear information, and to work together. We give some targets to them as well. We give some cultural tips about how they can do this, and we work together in this journey. So it's a journey, but I think that we need to start even with baby steps and in a resilient way to arrive in a certain point that it's not going to be a 2030 goal, that we can make it earlier together with them.
And well, as I mentioned, I'm not directly involved in the suppliers program, but I have some data here. What we do at Iberdrola is we have a tool which is called Go Supply to measure the degree of sustainability that the suppliers have, and based on that, we establish individualized programs with the suppliers to support them in improving their sustainable mark. No, I would say, according to this system. And we also organize trainings and workshops specifically for them, to support them in this journey. We also have set up, for example, in Mexico, this tool to assist them in calculating their carbon footprint. I know in Spain we also assist them in these calculations, and we also organize bilateral meetings with them, also to understand better the challenges and support them in improving their sustainability rates. I don't know if this reply a bit to your question.
Thanks. Yeah, and maybe I'll add, very much building on what you've already said. Of course, a just transition is ensuring that we get there in a just way, and so especially for the smaller suppliers, there is this responsibility also to help them along, and this could be capacity building, working together to understand these calculations, like how do we build that with these smaller suppliers. So really good examples of how that's happening. I know that increasingly also in the EU with CSRD and CSDDD, there's so many requirements on small suppliers. So I hope we're increasingly also going to see initiatives like these to support everyone in the transition, and not sort of a consolidation of moving to bigger actors who can handle this, but really ensuring a just transition that can enable that small supplier inclusivity as well. Yeah. Any other? Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not related with this exactly what we were saying, but it was coming from at the end of the conversation before what Cristina was mentioning about good examples, and that you are bringing together like different plans and ideas for the just transition. And it's just to mention that we are also working on a database for a just transition. So now we are building it. I hope that it will be ready for next year, mid, I don't know, June or something like that. But the idea is to bring, to have together in a database all the examples that we can collect from unions, from different organizations about the just transition, like for example in collective bargaining agreements and or plans that they have with companies, like the case that I mentioned with ENI or with government. So all that will be compiled there, because we can feel that there is a lack of information sometimes, so it's difficult to find examples that others can copy or can take as a reference. So that's why we decided to invest a bit of our budget in order to create this database. So probably next year, next COP, I will be able to to show and to present that database. But so far we are working on it. So just for you to know that we will have that.
Thank you. And maybe, you talked a little bit about it previously as well, Christina, but we've also developed some tools to help you in this process. Is this working? Okay. Yeah. One of them being the stakeholder engagement guidance that just came out. You can find it on BSR's website, and it's a lot of learnings from this collaborative initiative, Energy for Just Transition, of actors who are a bit more advanced in their thinking there and are sharing sort of their experiences and learnings that we've sort of condensed into recommendations for companies. I would also recommend the Just Transition resource platform, which is a platform that we've developed, BSR, we mean Business B team, but a broader sort of business and just transition task force with a lot of the ecosystem actors working on just transition. And it's resources from everyone, but it's really trying to consolidate and pull them all together in one space. So there's sort of high-level steps on what you need to do on just transition, but then with, linking to that specific step, all of the relevant guidance and tools that exist for companies to do so. So definitely recommend looking at that. Any more questions? Yeah?
Good morning. My name is Arthur Laurent. I work at Microsol. We developed the cookstove projects in Latin America. Can you hear me? More? Better now. Thank you. I'm sorry I arrived a bit late. I'm really interested in this concept of just transition. I come from the climate justice background. All of what we do has been developing projects on the ground for local communities. Actually, we are happy to work with Natura in Mexico for a number of years. I'm just wondering, does having a net zero strategy and offsetting part of your footprint, is it part of just transition? Is it that concept of moving from climate justice to just transition? I would be interested in hearing your thoughts on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Very interesting question. I'm also happy to.
This is a very good question, and it makes us exactly thinking about that everything is connected again. So when you talk about a just transition, it's for me there are a lot of transitions at the same time. So when you talk about so how can I go to an economy based not only anymore, as I mentioned, carbon neutral is not enough, so moving from carbon neutral to net zero. And what it depends on, it is included in the journey. Just transition needs to be there, because to do this, to go to a carbon neutral to net zero, for example, in this specific aspect of the transition, you need to consider the communities, the vulnerable people that are the most ones that are affected in a proportional way of the climate. So the climate crisis that we are living. And the climate crises are totally proportional, directly involved in exactly this carbon emission. So everything is connected. And it includes nature. Nature is the answer of the question, how can I solve this issue? With nature-based solution. So when you provide income, when you provide this relation with the communities, you avoid deforestation. And when you avoid deforestation, you make this transition from carbon neutral to net zero. And to do this, you depend on income, you depend on the relationship with the communities and the nature-based solution to provide this. So, and this is exactly what affects the just transition, providing to the community and putting people in the middle of the discussion. We need to provide income and good conditions to these people to find another sourcing of income, economical activities to go to seize deforestation. And when you seize deforestation again in this virtual cycle, you are able to make this transition from carbon neutral to net zero. So everything is connected, and it's impossible to talk about this carbon neutral to net zero transition without talking or without including the just transition. Why the just the just transition? Because people are in the center, and everything goes and passes through the people to make it happen. So this would be my answer.
Yeah, I'm also happy to add a few thoughts. I completely agree with Anna here that, you know, we can't get to a net zero future without just transition because we depend on people and solutions that work for people, right? So it's absolutely crucial that we understand the social implications and that we engage those that are impacted in this transition, whether that regards climate transitions and strategies, but also the offsetting element, you know, to the extent that that's relevant, right? I think in relation to climate justice, the way that we see it at BSR is that just transition is what very strategically relates to corporate climate action and strategies to transition or build resiliency. So all of the decisions that companies make that have social implications in relation to climate, that is just transition. And usually climate justice can be seen as a little bit broader of also looking at societal and systemic inequalities, historic marginalization, and addressing these broader justice issues that relate to climate in a society. And just transition can be a little bit more strategically focused on the corporate action and implications of these. That's the way we would usually define it. Although I'll say, you know, of course, this becomes very interconnected, right? And we can see that in some of the examples given, that as you work with communities to address the climate impacts, the climate resiliency, the climate adaptation, this relates to climate justice for those relevant and impacted communities as well.
Yes, I mean, I completely agree with what they said, and that's why also we were talking earlier, the most impacted ones, of course, nature, but of course the women, youth. No, we need to take into account also this group SMEs in the case of suppliers. So we have to take into account the most impacted ones, the most vulnerable ones, and it's completely linked.
No, it's no.
Yeah.
No, nothing to add. It's exactly that. What they have been saying is to take everyone into account, and the most vulnerable ones. That's, as Christina was saying, is the youth, the women, the communities, the indigenous people. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and a question on the back.
Hi, I'm Claudia Ochoa. I work at Yale University. Is that okay? Good. So I have a couple of questions. The first one, is it okay here? Okay. The first question is related to adaptation measures that you're designing or implementing in your business. I feel like for Natura, for example, working with the harvesting of Brazilian nuts, or for you guys thinking about storaging, or people that are not going to be able to work because of climate and the weather in general changing. If you are thinking about that, or how are you approaching that? And the second question is more related to your role in the organization that you lead, because we work with students that are grad students that are very invested on not only finding a job, but finding the right job to make a huge change and improve what we are, like facing nowadays. I'm just trying to think about like the roles that you have and how you are like making it work, but at the same time reshaping it because new challenges are coming. And it's not only related to climate, it's related to migration, it's related to rethink about sustainability. So yeah, if you can speak a little about your roles and how you're reshaping them.
Okay, I can start. Thanks for your question. The first one, it's a good question that when you talk about adaptation, that again is totally related with resilience, business resilience. Natura is one of the early adopters in TCFD, so we put the climate and TNFD, we are trying to do the same. But when you put we have a climate risk matrix, exactly to generate this kind of discussion, even in the board of the company. So when you present, the risks are not only financial risks, everything is integrated. We have an IPNL, there is integrated profits and losses, and climate is directly involved on this IPNL. That is exactly what are the risks involved to our business that I mentioned before. Our business is totally dependent on the business of the communities that we have a relationship with, so they need to have adaptation. We need to have adaptation in order to have resilience in the end of the day. And then we have a protocol that I mentioned before. There is a crisis climate protocol. That is what exactly we do when something happens, as we have a climate crisis in the south of Brazil or even in the north. So and in Peru and in other countries as well, that is happening very often. So how we can, as a corporate company and as a partner, much more than a corporate company, a partner and off-taker of these communities, how can we deal with this? So we have a risk matrix, everything that is dependent on the climate, and some action plans whenever it happens, what are we going to do and what kind of action and allowance and benefits we can provide to the suppliers and especially to the riverside communities that we have relationship with. So this is the first question. The second question about the role, I am responsible for sustainability, for corporate communication and legal. Unfortunately, I'm a lawyer, so I'm not very perfect in this journey. But what I can say is that another point that we are trying to make this transition is from sustainability to regeneration. That is exactly what you asked about. So sometimes it's not enough to sustain some practices that we used to have, otherwise we're going to continue having the same results. We need to change and to migrate from sustainability to regeneration, to regenerative business model, connecting business with climate, nature, and people.
Thank you. And maybe to your second question as well, I'll add a little bit, because I think it is a difficult process of understanding what are some of these key topics and what continue to be topics and what are future risks and opportunities that we maybe don't yet understand. So what we advise our corporate members is that apart from, of course, very extensive stakeholder engagement with identified stakeholders, it's also having a look at climate risks and scenarios and overlapping that with vulnerability indexes. So doing sort of a high-level hotspot mapping, essentially, of what are the people risks related to climate that you might see relevant to your supply chain and operations. And that can sometimes help identify some of the stakeholders that you can then engage to understand a little bit more about what are the impacts you're facing now and in the future. How can we support this transition? How might you be an important player in this future business resiliency or strategy? So I don't know if it answers your questions, but that's sort of an advice to start thinking about it also internally. And then the other thing I'll say, and maybe speaking a little bit to what Christina mentioned earlier as well about engaging so many different functions across the company. Because different functions have deep expertise in their own area, sometimes combining those insights and having those discussions help identify some of the issues that we might not have seen in our siloed approach. So we might be understanding, what do we want to do on climate? What are the specific assets where we're transitioning, or where we need to move to a new geography, or where we're now going to work more on circularity, or the waste or sort of end use part is going to be more important. And And then, human rights or other colleagues might have a better understanding of, well, okay, if this is what we're looking at, these are some of the impacts on the social side that we need to understand and navigate. And so really bringing people together across the company can enable those discussions and better understanding of what are we facing here. I know it can be a little bit of a difficult process, and we're hearing a lot of company members come to us and ask, well, how do we do that in practice? And it's a good question, and it's great to hear from companies that are already doing this. At BSR, we've responded with what we call a Just Transition Learning Lab, which is essentially 4 workshops for peer learning, but each of them being specific to one key function. So the first one, sustainability people, the next one, procurement and supply chain, then the next one, human resources, and the last one for decision makers, but really to create this forum for discussion with other people in the same job or position. How do you see Just Transition impacting your work? What is necessary to integrate in the day-to-day? What are the key issues you're seeing, and how do we work with this? And then we would help sort of bring all of that together from the different people engaged in a single company workshop to really discuss, okay, well, now we've had this high-level mapping using also that peer exploration and discussion. So what does it mean then across these different departments for the company, and how do we move forward from here? Good. I think we have 7 minutes left, so maybe what I'll ask, if you have any final remarks, insights that we haven't gotten around, anything you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, thank you. I can start. I think that one of the key issues here is that what we have been hearing, the trust, but also the different roles that everyone has in this process. So one is the role of the governments at national and local level. When they are planning to make these energy policies and industrial policies, how they do it, thinking on the entire communities and so on. Another one is the role of business in order to invest in the future, but also to bring everyone to the table. And another one is the role of workers and the communities to engage for that process to be as successful as possible and to be able to make it in a smooth way. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Great. I think that some takeaways that I mentioned before is the keywords that I think that we need to think about this every day. That is collaboration, cooperation, adaptation, resilience, and culture. One thing that you said is that sustainability needs to be a transversal area within the organization, regardless the core business of your company. So you need to have policies, practices, and to walk the talk. So this is something that is important to have, and to have this sustainability needs not only to be in one area, like it is today is in legal and corporate communication, tomorrow will be in supply chain, other day in HR. So everybody needs to talk about this, to put this on the table, and to be one sourcing of the decision of the business. Needs to be in the business table, in the board table, in order to take the right decisions, connecting all areas in the same purpose. So this would be my main takeaway.
Hi. So maybe not to repeat, no? I think we covered a lot of important things, but maybe to insist, because I think we mentioned it just once, on the importance of skills and capacity building. No, because I think this is very important to really to achieve this just transition in a successful way. We need to be provided of the needed skills and of the needed capacities. So just to mention this, because we mentioned it, but very briefly, so just to insist on that.
Yeah, and it's a core part, so thank you for re-emphasizing. Well, thank you so much for all of your really great insights. It's such a challenging process, and I think these learnings really help to make it a little bit more concrete. What does it mean in practice, and how can companies start doing this? So thank you so much, and maybe can we give a round of applause to our speakers? Yeah, thank you. And maybe that's it from today, but feel free to reach out or visit our website for some of these guidance that we've been talking about.